Hello. So I hope things are alright. My mic has been moved a little bit, but looks like it's still picking up okay. Let me just get my water here. We are on Chapter 36, The Razek's Revenge. A dull throbbing roused Aragon. Every time blood pulsed through his head, it brought a fresh wave of pain. He cracked his eyes open and winced. Tears rushed into his eyes as he looked directly into a bright lantern. He blinked and looked away. When he tried to sit up, he realized that his hands were tied behind his back. He turned lethargically and saw Brom's arms. Aragon was relieved to see that they were bound together. Why was that? He struggled to figure it out until the thought suddenly came to him. They wouldn't tie up a dead man. But who are they? He swiveled his head further, then stopped as a pair of black boots entered his vision. Aragon looked up, right into the cowled face of a Razek. Fear jolted through him. He reached out for magic and started to voice a word that would kill the Razek, but then halted, puzzled. He could not remember the word. Frustrated, he tried again, only to feel it slip out of his grasp. Above him, the Razek laughed chillingly. "The drug is working, yes? I think you will not be bothering us again." There was a rattle off to the left, and Aragon was appalled to see the second Razek fit a muzzle over Saphira's head. Her wings were pinioned to her sides by black chains. There were shackles on her legs. Aragon tried to contact her, but felt nothing. "She was most cooperative once we threatened to kill you," hissed the Razek. Squatting by the lantern, he rummaged through Aragon's bags, examining and discarding various items until he removed Zarok. "What a pretty thing for one so insignificant. Maybe I will keep it." He leaned closer and sneered. "Or maybe, if you behave, our master will let you polish it." His moist breath smelled like raw meat. Then He turned the sword over in his hand and screeched as he saw the symbol on the scabbard. His companion rushed over. They stood over the sword, hissing and clicking. At last they faced Aragon. "You will serve our master very well. Yes." Aragon forced his thick tongue to form words. "If I do, I will kill you." They chuckled coldly. "Oh no, we are too valuable. But you are disposable." A deep snarl came from Saphira. Smoke roiled from her nostrils. The Razek did not seem to care. Their attention was diverted when Brom groaned and rolled onto his side. One of the Razek grabbed his shirt and thrust him effortlessly into the air. "It's wearing off. Give him more. Let's just kill him," said the shorter Razek. "He has caused us much grief." The taller one ran his finger down the sword. "A good plan, but remember, the king's instructions were to keep him alive. We can say we killed him when we captured him." "And what of this one?" the Razek asked, pointing his sword at Aragon. "If he talks..." His companion laughed and drew a wicked dagger. "He would not dare." There was a long silence. Then, agreed. They dragged Brom to the center of the camp and shoved him to his knees. Brom sagged to one side. Aragon watched with growing fear. "I have to get free." He wrenched at the ropes, but they were too strong to break. "None of that now," said the tall Razek, poking him with a sword. He nosed the air and sniffed. Something seemed to trouble him. The other Razek growled, yanked Brom's head back, and swept the dagger towards his exposed throat. At that very moment, a low buzz sounded, followed by the Razek's howl. An arrow protruded from his shoulder. The Razek nearest Aragon dropped to the ground, barely avoiding the second arrow. He scuttled to his wounded companion, and they glared into the darkness, hissing angrily. They made no move to stop Brom as he barely staggered upright. "Get down!" cried Aragon. Brom wavered, then tottered toward Aragon, as more arrows hissed into the camp from the unseen attackers. The Razek rolled behind some boulders. There was a lull, then the arrows came from the opposite direction. Caught by surprise, the Razak reacted slowly. Their cloaks were pierced in several places, and a shattered arrow buried itself in one's arm. With a wild cry, the smaller Razak fled towards the road, kicking Aragon viciously in the side as he passed. His companion hesitated, then grabbed the dagger from the ground and raced after him. As he left the camp, he hurled the knife at Aragon. A strange light suddenly burned in Brom's eyes. He threw himself in front of Aragon, his mouth open in a soundless snarl. The dagger struck him with a soft thump, and he landed heavily on his shoulder. His head lolled limply. "No!" screamed Aragon, though he was doubled over in pain. He heard footsteps, then his eyes closed, and he knew no more. Chapter 37. Murtagh. For a long while, Aragon was aware of only the burning in his side. Each breath was painful. It felt as though he had been the one stabbed, not Brom. His sense of time was skewed. It was hard to tell if weeks had gone by or only a few minutes. When consciousness finally came to him, he opened his eyes and peered cautiously at the campfire several feet away. His hands were still tied together, but the drug must have worn off because he could think clearly again. "Saphira, are you injured?" "No, but you and Brom are." She crouched over Aragon, wings spread protectively on either side. "Saphira, you didn't make that fire, did you? And you couldn't have gotten out of those chains by yourself." "No, I didn't think so." Aragon struggled to his knees and saw a young man sitting on the far side of the fire. The stranger, dressed in battered clothes, exuded a calm, assured air. In his hands was a bow. At his side, a long, hand-and-a-half sword. A white horn, bound with silver fittings, lay in his lap, and the hilt of a dagger protruded from his boot. His serious face and fierce eyes were framed by locks of brown hair. He appeared to be a few years older than Aragon, and perhaps an inch or so taller. Behind him, a gray war horse was picketed. The stranger watched Saphira warily. "Who are you?" asked Aragon, taking a shallow breath. The man's hands tightened on his bow. "Murtagh." His voice was low and controlled, but curiously emotional. Aragon pulled his hands underneath his legs, so they were in front of him. He clenched his teeth to the side and flared with pain. "Why did you help us?" "You aren't the only enemies the Razak have. I was tracking them." "You know who they are?" "Yes." Aragon concentrated on the ropes that bound his wrists and reached for the magic. He hesitated, aware of Murtagh's eyes on him, then decided it didn't matter. "Gerda!" he grunted. The ropes snapped off his wrists. He rubbed his hands to get the blood flowing. Murtagh sucked in his breath. Aragon braced himself and tried to stand, but his ribs seared with agony. He fell back, gasping between clenched teeth. Murtagh tried to come to his aid, but Saphira stopped him with a growl. "I would have helped you earlier, but your dragon wouldn't let me near you." "Her name's Saphira," said Aragon tightly. "Now let him by. I can't do this alone. Besides, he saved our lives." Saphira growled at him again, but folded her wings and backed away. Murtagh eyed her flatly as he stepped forward. He grasped Aragon's arm, gently pulling him to his feet. Aragon yelped and would have fallen without support. They went to the fire where Brom lay on his back. "How is he?" asked Aragon. "Bad," said Murtagh, lowering him to the ground. "The knife went right between his ribs. You can look at him in a minute, but first we'd better see how much damage the Razak did to you." He helped Aragon remove his shirt, then whistled. "Ouch." "Ouch," agreed Aragon weakly. A blotted bruise extended down his left side. The red, swollen skin was broken in several places. Murtagh put a hand on the bruise and pressed lightly. Aragon yelled, and Saphira growled a warning. Murtagh glanced at Saphira as he grabbed the blanket. "I think you have some broken ribs. It's hard to tell, but at least 2, maybe more. You're lucky you're not coughing up blood." He tore the blanket into strips and bound Aragon's chest. Aragon slipped the shirt back on. "Yes, I'm lucky." He took a shallow breath, sidled over to Brom, and saw that Murtagh had cut open the side of his rope to bandage the wound. With trembling fingers, he undid that bandage. "I wouldn't do that," warned Murtagh. "He'll bleed to death without it." Aragon ignored him and pulled the cloth away from Brom's side. The wound was short and thin, belaying its depth. Blood streamed out of it. And he had learned when Garrow was injured, a wound inflicted by the Razak was slow to heal. He peeled off his gloves while furiously searching his mind for the healing words Brahm had taught him. "Help me, Saphira," he implored. "I am too weak to do this alone." Saphira crouched next to him, fixing her eyes on Brahm. "I am here, Eragon." As her mind joined his, new strength infused his body. Eragon drew upon their combined power and focused it on the words. His hand trembled as he held it over the wound. "Wise, heal," he said. His palm glowed, and Brahm's skin flowed together, as if it had never been broken. Murtagh watched the entire process. It was over quickly. As the light vanished, Eragon sat, feeling sick. "We've never done that before," he said. Saphira nodded. "Together, we can cast spells that are beyond either of us." Murtagh examined Brahm's saddle. Brahm sighed and asked, "Is he completely healed?" "I can only mend what's on the surface. I don't know enough to fix whatever's damaged inside. It's up to him now. I've done all I can." Eragon closed his eyes for a moment, utterly weary. "My head seems to be floating in the clouds." "You probably need to eat," said Murtagh. "I'll make soup." While Murtagh fixed a meal, Eragon wondered who this stranger was. His sword and bow were of the finest make, as was his horn. Either he was a thief or accustomed to money, and lots of it. Why was he hunting the Razak? What have they done to make him an enemy? I wonder if he works for the Varden. Murtagh handed him a bowl of broth. Eragon spooned it down and asked, "How long has it been since the Razak fled?" "A few hours." "We have to go before they return with reinforcements." "You might be able to travel," said Murtagh, then gestured at Brahm. "But he can't. You don't get up and ride away after being stabbed between the ribs." "If we make a litter, can you carry Brahm with your claws like you did with Garrow?" Eragon asked Saphira. "Yes, but the landing will be awkward." "As long as it can be done." Eragon said to Murtagh, "Saphira can carry him, but we need a litter. Can you make one? I don't have the strength." "Wait here." Murtagh left the camp, sword drawn. Eragon hobbled to his bags and picked up his bow from where it had been thrown by the Razak. He strung it, found his quiver, then retrieved Zarok, which lay hidden in the shadow. Last, he got a blanket for the litter. Murtagh returned with 2 saplings. He laid them parallel on the ground, then lashed the blanket between the poles. After he carefully tied Brahm to the makeshift litter, Saphira grasped the saplings and laboriously took flight. "I never thought I would see a sight like that," Murtagh said, an odd note in his voice. As Saphira disappeared into the sky, Eragon limped to Caddock and hoisted himself painfully into the saddle. "Thanks for helping us. You should leave now. Ride as far away from us as you can. You'll be in danger if the Empire finds you with us. We can't protect you, and I wouldn't see harm come to you by our account." "A pretty speech," said Murtagh, grinding out the fire. "But where will you go? Is there a place nearby you can rest in safety?" "No," admitted Eragon. Murtagh's eyes glinted, and he fingered the hilt of his sword. "In that case, I think I'll accompany you, until you're out of danger. I've no better place to be. Besides, if I stay with you, I might get another shot at the Razak, sooner than if I was on my own. Interesting things are bound to happen around a rider." Eragon wavered, unsure if he should accept the help from a complete stranger, yet he was unpleasantly aware that he was too weak to force the issue either way. If Murtagh proves untrustworthy, Saphira can always chase him away. "Join us if you wish," he shrugged. Murtagh nodded and mounted his grey warhorse. Eragon grabbed Snowfire's reins and rode away from the camp into the wilderness. An oxbow moon provided wan light, but he knew it would only make it easier for the Razak to track them. Though Eragon wanted to question Murtagh farther, he kept silent, conserving his energy for riding. Near dawn, Saphira said, "I must stop. My wings are tired and Brahm needs attention. I discovered a good place to stay, about 2 miles ahead of where you are." They found her sitting at the base of a broad sandstone formation that curved out of the ground like a great hill. Its sides were pocked with caves of varying sizes. Similar domes were scattered across the land. Saphira looked pleased with herself. "I found a cave that can't be seen from the ground. It's large enough for us all, including the horses. Follow me." She turned and climbed up the sandstone, her claws digging sharply into the rock. The horses had difficulty, as their shod hooves could not grip the sandstone. Aragon and Murtagh had to pull and shove the animals for almost an hour before they managed to reach the cave. The cavern was a good 100 feet long and more than 20 feet wide, yet it had a small opening that would protect them from the bad weather and prying eyes. Darkness swallowed the far end, clinging to the walls like mats of soft black wool. "Impressive," said Murtagh. "I'll gather wood for the fire." Aragon hurried to Brom. Saphira had set him on a small rock ledge at the rear of the cave. Aragon clasped Brom's limp hand and anxiously watched his craggy face. After a few minutes, he sighed and went to the fire Murtagh had built. They ate quietly, then tried to give Brom water, but the old man would not drink. Stymied, they spread out their bedrolls and slept. And that is the end of that chapter. And we will read more later.